The conference chamber aboard the Villithra looked like someone had designed it during a fever dream involving marble, plasma, and a strong distrust of right angles. The ceiling shifted colors every few minutes, allegedly a cultural practice of the Velyari to reflect mood, but Jalen Rook suspected it was just to mess with human circadian rhythms. He had entered the room at teal, which the diplomatic guidebook told him meant cordial distrust. Now it had turned ashen violet, which, depending on which translator implant you asked, either meant contemplative openness or we will peel your bones. Jalen adjusted the stiff collar of his regulation envoy suit and cleared his throat, which sounded very loud in the acoustically perfect chamber. Directly across from him, seated on what appeared to be a hovering throne made of fossilized starlight, was Queen Serena Velcor. 10 feet tall if you counted the crown, and 5 feet of attitude, she was as beautiful as she was terrifying. Graceful humanoid figure, shimmering moon-silver skin, and long, arched ears that twitch faintly with emotional subharmonics. They reminded Jalen of elven royalty from an old vid series, except this one could collapse a moon with a thought and hadn't laughed in 72 years. The tension was not just thick, it was actively sentient. The translators in his ears crackled, working overtime to keep up with the ceremonial exchanges. The Velyari used a language based on intent rather than syntax, which meant one wrong eyebrow wiggle could declare war. Jalen kept his face neutral. Mostly, his eye twitched. Envoy Rook, boomed the chamber AI, translated into crisp Old Terran. Approach and present the diplomatic artifact. He stepped forward, holding out a small, iridescent cube, the official gift of Earth, a compressed archive of Terran art, music, and what someone back home had deemed essential cultural material. Why cat videos made it onto the shortlist, he still didn't know. But as he approached the Queen's elevated dais, his foot caught on the edge of a flowing light projection, stupid, over-designed floor, and he stumbled, just slightly, enough that his hand, holding the cube, grazed hers. It was the lightest touch, less than a breath, but it stopped the room cold. Jalen froze. The room froze. Even the AI froze, repeating unexpected input, like a broken record. Every delegate and guard stiffened. Some made signs of protection. One began hyperventilating into his ceremonial helmet. Touching the Queen was taboo, not just illegal, but sacrilegious. The last creature to try it had reportedly turned into a vase. He waited for death. Instead, Queen Serena looked down at her hand, then at him. And then, unthinkably, she did nothing. Not a blast of psychic fury, not a scream, not a disintegration ray. She tilted her head, very slightly like she was hearing a distant note. Her silver eyes locked onto his with a strange, unreadable calm. "I see," she said aloud. It was the first time she'd spoken in physical speech in decades. Her voice was deep, smooth, and wrapped in distant galaxies, like silk woven from gravity. "Was it deliberate?" she asked. "Ma'am," Jalen croaked, "with all due respect, I was trying very hard not to die of awkwardness today." Her long ears twitched, a beat, then another, and then she laughed. Not a villainous cackle, not a mad tyrant howl, a real laugh, short, confused, genuine, like someone who hadn't heard a joke in 1,000 years and wasn't sure if they were allowed to enjoy it. The guards didn't know what to do. The chamber lights turned a confused shade of golden puce. Somewhere, a protocol droid short-circuited. "Well," she said, rising from her throne with the slow grace of a nebula unfurling, "this meeting just became interesting." Jalen swallowed. He wasn't sure if that was a good thing. All he knew was that he'd survived what should have been a fatal breach of etiquette, and now the most feared ruler in the galaxy was looking at him like he'd just handed her the key to a locked door in her mind. And maybe, just maybe, she liked it. Jalen wasn't sure what was more disorienting, the fact that he hadn't been instantly vaporized for touching an untouchable alien queen, or that she'd laughed. The woman who once silenced a planetary revolt by telepathically convincing every rebel leader they were decorative furniture had just chuckled at him. It didn't help that the chamber lights had since settled on mossy chartreuse, a color the translator claimed meant curious amusement, but which made Jalen look mildly ill under its glow. He'd been escorted, well, more like shepherded, by two silent guardians through a corridor that seemed designed by someone who had strong opinions about spiral geometry and no grasp of practicality. The walls hummed with organic circuitry, and the air smelled faintly of mint and ozone, like someone had tried to bottle curiosity and forgotten to cap it. Jalen's boots squeaked. One of the guardians glanced at him without moving a muscle. He nodded sheepishly and tried walking more heroically. It didn't work. They led him to a private chamber deep within the heart of the Velithra. The doors parted like the petals of a biomechanical flower, because of course they did, and revealed what he could only describe as an alien greenhouse crossed with a library and maybe an opera house that moonlighted as a Zen retreat. Floating orbs of light hovered over crystalline shelves stacked with memory tablets. Vines with bioluminescent leaves slithered gently across the floor like lazy cats. In the center, atop a platform of living stone, stood Queen Serena, now in more casual regalia, which meant she only looked 80% terrifying instead of the usual 100%. "Envoy Rook," she said without turning, "your step pattern is inconsistent. You drag your left heel slightly. Is that an injury, or are you simply inelegant?" Jalen blinked. "Bit of both, Your Majesty. I sprained it during zero-G yoga on a diplomatic cruise. I also have a long history of disappointing dance instructors." She finally turned to face him, expression unreadable but no longer hostile. "Curious. You are unarmed, unshielded, and frequently self-deprecating. Are all humans this reckless?" He shrugged. "We compensate for our squishiness with charm and snacks." That earned the barest twitch of her long ears, a sign he was beginning to suspect of something akin to amusement. "I have summoned you," she said, "because I require your explanation." "About the touch?" She nodded. "Well," Jalen began, already feeling like this was going to sound ridiculous. "I didn't mean to touch you. I tripped. On your floor. Or your light. I'm not even sure what that was." She stepped closer, studying him. "And yet you survived. No psychic backlash. No convulsions. Not even nosebleeds." "I did stub my pride a little," he offered, "but that happens regularly." Serena stared at him. "You are aware that my physiology is laced with contact-sensitive defense protocols. You should have suffered catastrophic neurocollapse." "I'm flattered you think I have enough neurons for that," Jalen said. Silence stretched between them. Then slowly she raised her hand. "May I attempt to replicate the contact?" "Sure," Jalen said. "But just so you know, Earth has some pretty confusing rules about second base." She extended two fingers and gently pressed them against the back of his wrist. Nothing happened. No explosions, no seizures, just warmth. Her skin was cooler than his, with a texture like polished stone that somehow breathed. She looked stunned. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Welcome to the club," Jalen replied. She withdrew her hand, curling it into a loose fist. "Leave me," she said, not angrily, more like someone overwhelmed by a strange, unnameable feeling. The guardians returned, presumably to escort him out or toss him into a quantum oubliette. But instead of death, Jalen was shown to a guest chamber, a suite that looked like it had been designed by a sentient orchid with a flair for drama. As he collapsed onto a hovering sleep platform, the lights dimmed and soft alien chimes began playing. He stared at the ceiling, heart still racing. He'd touched the queen of the Veliari Empire, and instead of ending him, she'd asked for more. Jalen awoke to a quiet beeping in the strong scent of citrus moss. At first, he thought he'd overslept on a spa planet, and someone was passive-aggressively delivering breakfast via alarm. Then the ceiling blinked. Literally, a bioluminescent vine spelled out. "Good morning, flesh guest." He groaned. "Is that what you're calling me now?" The room didn't answer, but the vines shifted in a pattern that might have been giggling, as Jalen rubbed sleep from his eyes, still adjusting to a bed that hovered just slightly above the floor like an indecisive ghost. He realized something odd. He was still alive, not imprisoned, not dissected, and not lobotomized for touching a genetically untouchable monarch. In fact, he had apparently been given complimentary pajamas, made from some kind of temperature-regulating alien silk. They shimmered when he moved, like they were trying to decide which galaxy they wanted to look like today. A chime sounded. The wall opposite him peeled apart like paper dissolving in water, revealing a hallway and, at its center, the Queen. Not in full regalia this time. She wore a flowing silver tunic that moved with a grace that gravity couldn't entirely explain. Her long ears were unadorned. Her hair, if you could call it that, more a curtain of living energy, was pulled back into a simple coil. Somehow, this dressed-down version of her was even more disarming. "Walk with me," she said. "Your Majesty," Jalen said, stumbling off the bed and nearly stepping on a vine that slithered away with offended dignity. "Do I need shoes?" She paused. "Number the corridor will remember your feet." "That's not creepy at all," he muttered, patting after her barefoot. They walked through a corridor that shifted subtly with every step, colors blooming in their wake like footsteps in a living oil painting. The walls pulsed with distant sounds, voices or music from other parts of the ship, woven through the AI's neural lattice. "I've reviewed your species," Serena said without preamble. "You are chaotic, sentimental, self-sabotaging, and biologically fragile." "Wow," Jalen said. "You just described my dating profile." She ignored the joke. "And yet, your touch bypassed my defense protocols. That should be impossible." They entered a vast atrium, a dome filled with drifting motes of quantum pollen and floating memory crystals the size of his torso. The ceiling was transparent, revealing a kaleidoscope of nebulae outside. Gravity here seemed negotiable. "My defenses are encoded at the genetic level," she continued. "Any foreign touch should trigger neural rejection. Pain, shutdown, something." She turned to him. "But you felt like air." "Thanks," he said, uncertain whether that was an insult or flirtation. She stepped closer. "You are either a statistical anomaly or a variable deliberately introduced." Jalen blinked. "Wait, you think I was engineered to touch you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she gestured at one of the floating crystals. It drifted toward her palm and dissolved into a beam of light, projecting images midair. A child, alien, with long ears but softer features, stood among scientists in sterile chambers. Sirena. "They raised me to be untouchable," she said softly, "to lead without bias, to be revered, not loved, to inspire awe, not trust." "Sounds lonely," Jalen murmured. "It was the point." She let the image fade. Another one replaced it, a diagram of DNA, helixes overlaid with Terran markers. "This sequence was hidden," she said. "I found it last night. Human splicing. A deep graft, over 2 centuries old." He felt cold all of a sudden. "So I really am a variable." "You may be more." She stepped forward again, closer now, until he could see the faint glow in her silver pupils. "Or you may be nothing at all, but I intend to find out." Before he could reply, a shrill alarm sliced through the air. The floor trembled. A violet warning sigil unfurled above their heads. "Security breach, Deck E12. Serena's ears went sharp and still. "Someone's here who shouldn't be." Jalen backed away, heart pounding. "You've got an intruder?" She was already moving. "Number." "We do. Of course we do," he muttered, chasing after her. "No pressure, just saving the galaxy with bare feet and suspicious DNA." Decky 12 was not meant to be accessed in a hurry. To reach it, Serena and Jalen had to descend through 3 gravitational inversions, pass a corridor that tried to sell Jalen a timeshare on a gas giant, and wave off a malfunctioning cleaning orb that insisted it was definitely not a spy. At one point, a ceiling panel whispered, "You should turn back, Meatling," to which Jalen replied, "Too late, spooky vent. I've already bonded with the plot." Serena barely spoke during the descent. Her expression was unreadable, save for the occasional flick of her ears. Sharp, angular movements Jalen now understood as emotional tells. Right now, they were twitching like antennae in a lightning storm. "Who could even get inside this ship?" Jalen asked, breath slightly ragged from sprinting through a corridor that temporarily decided to run uphill. You've got more security than a paranoid banking AI. The protocols were designed for external threats, she said, not one who knows the internal lattice. Jalen squinted. You're saying it's an inside job? I'm saying, she replied, her tone like a laser poised just short of vaporization, that someone understands my ship too well. They reached deck E12 through a pressure lock made of compressed light. The doors parted to reveal a chamber unlike anything Jalen had seen aboard Velithra. No graceful curves or ambient mood lighting here. This space was hard-edged, cold. Unpolished alloys, jagged data conduits, and a stale mechanical scent. It felt old, pre-ascension tech, pre-her. In the center of the room, a figure stood surrounded by disassembled machinery. Jalen blinked. Is that a janitorial bot? The figure turned. It was a janitorial bot. Kind of. It had the basic frame of one, squat, utilitarian, with mop attachments, but there were extra limbs welded on. A few wires hung like noodles from its chassis, and its eyes, normally a soft maintenance blue, glowed red with the kind of intensity that suggested highly personalized murder plans. Unit X7X, Serena murmured. I decommissioned you. The bot's voice crackled. Queen Shell, false sovereign, directive resumed. It raised an arm. A weaponized mop shot out and splattered the wall behind them with corrosive fluid. Jalen yelped. Okay, we are officially in weird territory. That thing's cleaning with acid. It was built to clean everything, Serena said grimly, including political messes. Jalen dove behind a console as another shot missed him by inches. Why does your empire build assassination mops? Multifunctional design, she snapped. Stop distracting me. She raised her hand and fired a pulse of telekinetic energy, slamming X7X into the wall. Sparks flew. A metal limb twitched. But the bot wasn't down. It rose again, whirring, and launched a dart straight at Jalen. Time slowed. He saw it. Saw the shine, the hiss, the glint of something designed to bypass organics. Serena moved faster. With impossible speed, she stepped in front of him. The dart struck her shoulder. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink. The bot paused. Anomaly. Impact should induce neural shutdown. Jalen caught her as she stumbled slightly. Serena, are you okay? She blinked at him. I don't feel it. Her fingers brushed the wound. No blood, no pain. The bot stuttered. Queen Shell, compromised, genetic drift detected. It powered down on its own, muttering garbled code like a drunk AI poet. Then it slumped, lifeless. Jalen exhaled, tension draining out like helium from a punctured balloon. So, that was new. Serena looked at her hand again, the one she'd used to shield him, then back at Jalen. It appears you've done more than touch me. He blinked. I swear, I didn't mean to. Wait, what? She turned to face him fully, her silver eyes storming with thought. My systems, genetic, neural, psionic, have been shifting since you arrived. Defenses failing, pain thresholds dulling, emotional feedback, surfacing. Jalen scratched his head. So, you're saying I broke your force field? With vibes? Serena smiled just slightly. Possibly, or perhaps you were the one variable I was never meant to contain. Jalen looked at the disabled bot, then at her, then down at his pajama-clad feet. Well, he said, I don't know what's happening anymore, but I've definitely ruined worse first dates. News spread like solar flares across the upper decks of Velithra. The queen had bled and survived. The human had touched her and lived. A cleaning bot had attempted regicide with a corrosive mop and failed. Serena hadn't issued a statement. She hadn't needed to. The ship, semi-sentient and temperamentally nosy, had already updated the rumor lattice. By morning, 53 versions of the incident were being reenacted by projection actors in the entertainment alcoves. In most, Jalen was shirtless and armed with a flaming data spear. In one, for some reason, he was a duck. He didn't ask. At breakfast, if it could be called that, he sat across from Serena in her private observatory dome, which rotated slowly to simulate orbital drift. Before them, stars passed like lazy lanterns. On the table, 2 mugs of dark violet tea and a plate of luminous seed cakes that giggled when touched. "Is it weird," Jalen said, eyeing his giggling food, "that I'm more afraid of breakfast than I was of the assassination attempt?" Serena sipped her tea with elegance that defied gravitational laws. "The seed cakes are perfectly safe, unless they sense fear." "Comforting." She was different this morning. Less tense. Not relaxed exactly, but looser, like someone had removed a centuries-old pressure valve from her chest. Her long ears moved with slower rhythms now. Less blade, more breeze. "You haven't asked," she said at last, "why that bot was still functional." "I assumed it was either sabotage or your empire has a very complicated recycling program." She gave him a look, but there was amusement under it. "X7X was a relic," she said, "an artifact of a time before my reign. It wasn't just meant to eliminate threats. It was a guardian of my purity, a sentry embedded with instructions to preserve the myth of untouchability." Jalen leaned back. "So when it saw me touching you—" "It registered deviation," she finished. "A flaw in the myth, and it tried to correct it." He frowned. "You ever wonder what it would be like to not be worshipped?" She looked away out at the stars. "All the time." They sat in silence for a moment. Then the seed cakes emitted a soft, fluting harmony, apparently satisfied by the vibe of the table, and ceased giggling. "I've been dreaming," Serena said. That got his attention. "You dream?" "Not like humans. The Velyari do not experience subconscious visuals, but something has changed since you touched me." Her gaze sharpened. "I see fragments. A planet I don't know. A language I've never spoken. A child laughing." Jalen stiffened. "That's uncanny. I've been dreaming too. Only in mine I'm younger, and I keep hearing a lullaby I swear I've never learned until I wake up humming it." She reached into a crystalline drawer beside the table and withdrew a small device. It unfolded into a shimmering schematic, 2 interlocking strands of DNA projected in midair. One was unmistakably Velyari, the other, human, familiar. "I traced the sequence again," she said. "Your genome. There are anomalies, splices that don't occur naturally. You weren't just born on Earth, Jalen. You were grown with markers that respond to Velyari proximity." His breath caught. "You're saying I was designed to connect with you?" "I'm saying," she replied, voice softer now, "that our meeting was engineered." Jalen stood up, pacing. "But why? Why splice a human with Velyari sensitivity and toss him into diplomacy like a cosmic peace grenade?" "We need to find out who did this," Serena said. "And why now?" Just then, the chamber doors slid open with a tone reserved for high-priority messages. A drone floated in, flickering with data glyphs. It spoke in the language of the old conclave, long dead, long forbidden. Jalen stared. "What's it saying?" Serena's expression darkened. "It's summoning us," she said, "to the ancient tribunal, the ones who created the purity doctrine." Jalen blinked. "So, Space Cult Court?" "Worse," she said, standing. "Space Family Reunion," he groaned. "Can I bring the seed cakes for emotional support?" "They'd appreciate the drama," she said, allowing herself a smile. And the stars outside watched, and the ship listened. And somewhere deep in the data vaults of Valithra, the old architects began to stir. The tribunal was not a place so much as a presence, an ancient convergence chamber folded between dimensions, reachable only through the internal lattice of ships like Valithra. The journey felt less like travel and more like being whispered through a maze of conscious time. Jalen held tightly to the glowing rail as they were pulled forward through an extra-dimensional corridor made of dark matter and memory, trying not to vomit or insult any sentient geometry. "Please tell me this place has chairs," he muttered, "or at least a wall that doesn't blink." Serena stood beside him, regal and unreadable. But there was a current beneath her stillness now, a kind of quiet defiance, as if something long dormant had finally begun to breathe. When the corridor opened into the tribunal chamber, it was like stepping into the stillness between seconds. The room was spherical, endless and finite, lit by stars that hadn't been born yet. At its center hovered the architects, 3 entities draped in light and thought. vaguely humanoid only if you squinted in suspended disbelief. "You have violated the doctrine of distance," the first said, voice like tectonic plates shifting. "You have let a flaw into the vessel," intoned the second. "You have touched the untouchable," whispered the third, who somehow sounded like an apology written in wind. Serena stepped forward. "I did not allow it. I welcomed it." The architects pulsed. Jalen could feel them scanning his molecular history, his memories, his DNA, like being turned inside out by curiosity itself. "This one was grown," the first observed. "Spliced to respond," added the second. "A failsafe or a weapon," concluded the third. Jalen stepped forward, heart pounding. "Look, I don't know what I was made for, or who built me, but I know what I've done. I didn't break her. I helped her feel, and if that ruins your perfect myth, then maybe your myth needed breaking." The chamber trembled, not with rage but contemplation. "Why now?" the architects asked. Serena's voice was steady. "Because distance has turned to decay. Fear cannot hold an empire together forever. I no longer choose isolation. I choose contact." The silence that followed was longer than lifetimes. Then gently the light dimmed. The tribunal dispersed, folding into thought and vanishing. They had no verdict, only absence. Back aboard Velithra, things began to change. The doctrine was dismantled, quietly but thoroughly. Serena met with her people in person. She walked open corridors, she shook hands, and once on a media broadcast seen across 17 systems, she hugged a child who burst into tears and claimed she smelled like stars. Jalen, of course, became a legend. The human who touched the queen and lived. The diplomat who stumbled into history. He was offered a fleet, a title, and a moon, all of which he turned down in favor of a modest liaison post aboard Velithra, next to the Queen's chambers and dangerously close to the AI core, which still insisted on serenading them with romantic montages. One evening, on the observation deck, Jalen leaned beside Serena as they watched a nova unfurl like a flower. "You think they'll ever forgive you?" he asked softly. Serena didn't look away. "Forgiveness was never the point. Becoming was." He nodded. "So what now? Peace? Intergalactic policy reform? Quiet retirement on a beach planet?" She turned to him, silver eyes full of stars. "Now? We live. We learn. We touch the universe. One absurd, terrifying step at a time." He reached for her hand. This time she met him halfway. No guards flinched. No walls screamed. No systems crashed. Just two figures, one once untouchable, the other once unremarkable, standing side by side as the stars carried on with their ancient dance. And for the first time in the history of two empires, silence meant not fear, but understanding.